It's time to feel what you've been bottling up. Life in rural America isn't easy. The long hours, the constant pressures, the demands of the land, livestock, and family, it all takes a toll. We're tough and we've got grit, but somewhere along the way, toughness started meaning bottling up emotions and powering through. But here's the truth. That strategy, it's not working and it's poisoning us. Maybe you've noticed and maybe you haven't, but the numbers don't lie. We're breaking down and it's showing up in our bodies, our relationships, and in the rising suicide rates in agriculture. You don't have to carry any of it alone. There's another way. If you're ready to stop being weighed down and start moving forward, my one-on-one good movement guidance is now open. Visit the link in the show notes to learn more and see if one-on-one guidance could be for you.
I'll carry you, you carry me, we'll help each other through it. Come on and see, good movement draws good movement.
Welcome to Good Movement Draws Good Movement, the podcast where farmers, ranchers, and rural folks can grow relationally through awareness, understanding, and effective communication. Hey, it's T. I'm your host, and I, along with my guests, will be covering topics related to drawing good movement. Things like self and social awareness, brain science, positive psychology, extending grace, and so much more. We'll share tools that can help you understand why you are the way you are, why others are the way they are, and how you can use that to step out of self-told lies with grace and compassion to draw good movement in conversations, relationships, and life in rural America. Let's go draw good movement. Welcome back to the Good Movement Draws Good Movement podcast. This episode is part 1 of 2 with our guest today. When we hit record, the intention was to just have one longer podcast episode, but there was a natural break in topics, and so I decided to break it out into 2 episodes. So this week is part 1, next week will be part 2. Welcome back to the Good Movement Draws Good Movement podcast. Today, I'm so excited because we have my friend Kelly Greene with us. I met Kelly during the 2023 Enneagram cohort in Dallas, Texas with the Suzanne Stabile. And I can't even tell you how excited I am to have her on the show today. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm excited, mainly just because I get to sit and look at you and talk to you. I know not everyone can see you, but it makes me happy to see you.
Oh, same. So Kelly is a certified health and wellness coach who specializes in helping clients cultivate holistic or whole self resilience. With a rich and varied career that has included law, university lecturing, and health coaching, Kelly brings a wealth of knowledge to her mission of helping individuals lead healthier, more resilient lives. Kelly has a master's degree in psychology from Harvard. That's so cool. Where her graduate research focused on early life traumatic events and holistic resilience. Her professional certificates, including a safe and sound protocol, clinical provider, and certified consulting hypnotist, equip her with a broad toolkit for addressing physical and emotional health challenges with her clients. Kelly's professional journey has taken her from practicing law and advocating for clients to teaching forensic psychology as a university lecturer and providing health and resilience coaching services. This multifaceted experience fuels her ability to connect with individuals from various backgrounds and professions and offer personalized strategies for growth and transformation. When she's not coaching or conducting mental health research, Kelly spends her time with her 10-year-old daughter or serving her community as the musical director of Middle Tennessee Children's Theater. She is passionate about helping people cultivate holistic resilience so they can overcome obstacles, embrace change, and unlock their potential. And per a text I received not too long ago, Kelly's considering getting mini Highlanders.
I'm getting them. I don't know where I'm getting them. I'm for sure getting them. So number 1, I did not know you were going to read that bio. That sounded so bougie. And I did not write it. When you said you needed a bio, I was like, because I've got several people that have asked me to be on their podcast, and I keep declining and keep declining. I'm like, okay, I need to do this because I want to talk about resilience.
Well, I feel honored that you're on my podcast.
You're number one. I reached out because you had asked me a long time ago, and I kept saying, no. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to start with Taryn. So I took my CV and I just threw it in the chat GPT. That's where the bio came from. And I was like, I don't have the stomach to write about myself, so this is how we're going to do it. But that was difficult to listen to, number one.
Okay, well, if that was difficult to listen to, my opening question was, tell us a little more about you and how you got to where you are.
Okay, I can talk about that. So yeah, and we can always come back to the mini Highland cows, because if any of your listeners have suggestions, I would love to hear them, because we've just expanded our property from like 8 acres to about 50 acres, which is nothing for what you do. And most of your listeners are, have thousands, but it's a big deal for us. So like the bio said, I've been an attorney for a really, really long time, over 15 years. Maybe it's 20 now. I don't even keep up with it. But I decided at year maybe 15, 12, 15, that, practicing law just wasn't for me. It wasn't like I went to law school because I had this lifelong desire to be an attorney. I had a lifelong desire to serve people and to help people. And that came out of, a lot of good and a lot of bad out of early life childhood traumatic experiences. So I had early trauma, as many people do, and that helped cultivate in me a helping, serving sort of personality. So I never went to law school because I wanted to have all this money and fight and win. It was, I want to help people in their struggles. And I realized, after more than a decade in law, that people really didn't want me to help them with their struggles. They just wanted me to help them win. And that tore me up. I'm naturally conflict aversive. I don't love engaging in conflict. However, I'm also not afraid of it. So I will handle a conflict, but I'd pay a price for it. So fast forward to 2020, I had more traumatic experiences happen in my personal life. And it caused me what I would consider the dark night of the soul. Some people consider that midlife crisis, where you just stop for a minute and you do some like major reflection on who you are, what you're doing. Is this right? Is this wrong? And the truth about it was that I hated practicing law. I loved my clients. I wanted to help them, but I didn't want to fight. And I loved learning, and I loved psychology, and I loved philosophy, and I loved all the things that, surrounded the study of psychology. And so I thought, I'm just going to take one class and see what I think. In the meantime, I decided to sell my law practice. So I had a law practice and a real estate title agency. I sold those, and basically the money that I made from that sale is what paid for me to go back to school and live for a few years while I was doing school. And it was the best decision I made, for me from a professional and personal standpoint, because I got to really learn who I was. During that time, I did the Enneagram cohort, which was fun and super important because it was learning personality from a teacher who has like lived experience, like lots of long-term, decades of lived experience. And that was good because I was balancing that with all of the personality from a psychological perspective, in academics, which is a lot of research experience, which are both vitally important. And you shouldn't always lean on one. It's important to kind of look at both of those. And so it was really great because I was getting what I felt was like a holistic education on personality and psychology. So all of that to say is that is kind of a little bit of that story of why I ended up, kind of going the psychology route.
Well, you said holistic approach. So holistic resilience is your jam.
Yeah. So like I said, I had early life traumatic experiences, and I had I think it was a therapist, I can't remember exactly. Someone in my life said, you're just so resilient for you to have gone through what you went through and for you to have these degrees and be an attorney and be successful. You're so resilient. And I heard what they were saying and I sort of agreed, but I sort of didn't because I feel like I'm a mess. I've always looked good on paper. Like you reading all that stuff about me, even though, I sent it to you. I get it. ChatGPT wrote it. It sounds so good on paper, but it's really not a reflection of someone's internal state. And I started asking myself, do I feel resilient? Because it looks like I'm resilient on paper, but I'd also struggled with autoimmune disease since I was 12. The first time I was diagnosed, I spent about a year in a wheelchair when I was 12 for unknown reasons. Like this was the 80s. And, we just didn't have a grip on what autoimmune disease was at the time. So I didn't get the label, this is autoimmune. It was just kind of like, we have no idea what's wrong with this kid. So I have had a rocky road of medical issues since I was young. And that has extended throughout my entire adulthood. So when that person said, I can't believe you've gone through all this and you're just so resilient, it made me start asking questions. A, what makes me quote unquote more resilient? And B, am I really resilient? So first paper I ever did when I was getting my master's was on early childhood trauma and traumatic experiences and what that does to your body. And what I found out is that there is so much research, loads, like this is not like one or two studies, plethora of studies that connect traumatic experiences, especially those in early childhood, to adverse physiological conditions and effects. Plenty. So we know it is fair to say that a possible outcome of traumatic experiences is a dysregulated body, physical illness. When you look at the resilience research, so I was curious about resilience. All of the resilience research, almost all of it. There are select studies, and these are super recent. Almost all of the resilience research looks at resilience as a psychological construct. So how research and how people have taught resilience forever has been you go through this traumatic event and either you have depression or, clinical depression, clinical anxiety, PTSD. And if you have those, you're not resilient. And if you don't have those, you are resilient. So because I was not clinically depressed, because I was not clinically anxious, because I did not have PTSD, I was what any practitioner and researcher would consider resilient. Yet I had myriad of autoimmune issues my entire life. So my research that I conducted personally, and then, really what I've worked on is understanding what does it mean to be resilient holistically, your whole self. So I define resilience a little different than how mainstream defines resilience. I defined it as the result, resilience being a result of successfully responding to, adapting from traumatic experiences and adversity, both psychologically and physiologically. And that this occurs through a process between, multiple systems. So, and our systems are intrapersonal within ourselves, interpersonal, us and others, like in relationship, and environmental. Whereas typically you hear resilience defined as a process of being psychologically healthy after adversity, or you hear it as bouncing back after adversity. And you also hear the stats that most people are resilient. Well, if you really look at resilience and include the physiological aspect, then I don't know that I could say that most people are resilient. I'll leave it at that. Because we do see, the number one cause of death in the United States and worldwide is chronic disease. A big contributor of chronic disease is metabolic syndrome, which is dysregulation, your blood pressure, your insulin resistance. So I can't even think of everything now that makes up metabolic syndrome, but it contributes to chronic disease. And those have been linked over and over again with traumatic experiences. So all of my work from a research perspective and what I do with clients is assessing and then helping them to develop themselves in a way that will make them holistically resilient and not just psychologically resilient. Does that sort of answer the holistic question?
Yes, I love that. Because I, for a while, have thought, I don't think, on The Princess Bride, inconceivable. Or no, is that what he says? Inconceivable. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that's it.
Like we throw this word resilience around, and I've thought, like, I don't think it means what you think it means.
That is such a good point. Most people, and I will even see things on social media. I've even seen a couple of studies, scientific studies, that say something about, you can be too resilient or being too resilient. And there is no such thing. That is incorrect. There's no such thing as too much resilience, because what resilience is just being healthy. That's saying I go through something really bad and I did not suffer the probable or possible adverse results of that experience. That's resilience. When someone says you're too resilient, it doesn't exist.
You're too healthy?
Or too healthy. Like, that's no such thing. And the reason why they say that is because they think that resilience is equal to grit. And grit is a concept that is fantastic. I love that the work on grit. Angela Duckworth out of University of Pennsylvania has pioneered all of this research on grit. And there are programs and helping folks, develop grit, which is great. And grit is that ability to dig deep and push through and not let life, emotion, cognition, things override you, but being able to just that's gritty, getting gritty and pushing through. And that is a really important concept, but you can be too gritty. You can be too gritty, right? Because if you're always operating on grit, the ability to push through, then you're also not resting and you're not processing and you're not feeling and you're not doing all the other things that are also necessary. So grit can be a component of resilience, but grit is not resilience. They can't live on the same plane because you can be too gritty. It's just that I don't know exactly how this idea of resilience and how they've become synonymous, but they're not. Being resilient is not being gritty. You don't have to be gritty to be resilient. Many times you will employ some grit. And there are times in life when we need to employ some grit and be a little more hardy. But there are a lot of people that are just too hardy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I find when I'm talking to folks, their mind's a little bit blown there because they just thought that being resilient meant that I could plow through. And that's not what resilience is. You hear a lot, and I'll use this analogy too, bouncing back. So when you think of a bouncing ball, right? You think of a ball hitting the ground, a bouncy ball, and it bounces back. A lot of people teach resilience is, like a bouncing ball, you're bouncing back. You're getting to the level of health you were prior to the traumatic event. But if you were to slow down, like when I teach resilience, I've got a video and I show what a ball looks like when it bounces. And a ball, when it bounces, when it hits the bottom, it morphs. It almost flattens out, even these rubbery balls. And it happens so fast, we can't see it. But the impact of that traumatic event hitting the ground morphs and changes that ball. And then that ball retakes its shape and goes, which means that resilience is not being affected. Resilience is the ability to be affected and come back from that. So what will happen is folks will go through a traumatic event and then they will suppress, it's immediate, I'm not going to look at it. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm not going to feel. I'm not going to think. They're trying to come out of that event. They're trying to be a ball that hits the ground that never actually changes, squishes. Part of taking that impact, the whole reason that ball was able to bounce back is because it absorbed the energy of the impact, processed it, and that's what allowed it to take its shape again. So by being quote unquote gritty all the time and saying, I'm not going to let this affect me, you have to absorb the energy of the impact, process it, move through it, and then let it go. So I find that folks are many times on one end of this spectrum of either being so gritty, they don't want to morph and bend. They're not even letting themselves hit the ground. I'm not going to hit the ground. I'm not going to feel that stuff. But then you have the other side, and this is becoming a little bit actually more common because we are a bit more, as a society, we're losing stigma against, mental disorders, mental illness, which is fantastic. We should. But lots of folks have kind of landed in the realm of everybody wants a diagnosis and everybody wants to just stay inside of feelings and sort of like a victim mentality. Well, that's just as bad as saying, I'm not going to feel. Because the whole point of being resilient is that you come back. So you have to go into the traumatic event. You have to feel it all and process it and think about it. And then you got to come out of it. You can't live in it.
So what you were just talking about reminded me of a text that you sent me while we were having a conversation, and you sent me this. And I love it so much, and I refer back to it quite a bit. Not being, air quotes, snowflakes means they aren't fragile. They're rigid. But rigidity, suppression, is actually what makes you breakable. Flexibility, the ability to express emotion in a healthy way, is what makes you resilient. And I love that so much because just because we aren't breaking apart and letting our emotions consume us doesn't mean we're not breakable. You gotta feel it.
You gotta feel it to heal it. And then you gotta move on. I have observed, and I don't have studies to back this up, but just in my work coaching and then clinically, I'm also getting my license as a marriage and family therapist. So I'm doing clinical work. I have observed in clients that we love extremes. Extremes are easy because they're neater in their boxes. And so, especially like dealing with family issues, I have observed, and I've observed this in myself as well. I'll make myself the example. As I was like working through issues with family members internally, before I started doing hard work, I can intellectualize any problem. I was never the person that said, oh, I had a perfect childhood. I said, oh, yes, there were some things that went wrong, but it's okay because this person had this problem and they had this disorder, they had this illness and they couldn't help it. And so I just rationalized and intellectualized why bad things happened to me. So as I started on my therapy journey, I realized that I needed to honor myself and in what happened and feel the anger and the pain of what happened to me. I went to this way other side and I went, these family members are terrible. They're awful. They should have never done this to me. I can't believe it. How have I made excuses for them? I don't ever want to talk to them. I don't ever want to see them. I don't ever want to. And I'm justified in that. And I really was justified in that, right? Except, see, that wasn't healthy either. Now, do I think that pendulum had to swing over here and I had to kind of live in that for a minute? Yeah. But that was not the end of my journey. And I think that a lot of folks, they go from making excuses for how things happen way over here to, I have a bad dad. I have a bad mom. I have a bad sister. I have a bad brother, right? They're terrible. We're done. And that's not the end. See, the end is the middle, is the balance, which is, you know what? They made some terrible decisions. I don't understand why they made those terrible decisions. Those terrible decisions affected me adversely, terribly. And this is who they are. This is what they did. Maybe this was the best they could do with what they had. Maybe it wasn't the best they could do with what they had. And my pain is valid. And it's over. And I'm going to accept them for exactly who they are, disordered, dysfunctional. I'm not going to cut them out of my life. I'm going to have healthy boundaries with them, but I'm also not going to hate them. I'm going to forgive them because I'm the one that takes the benefit of that forgiveness. And that's the place where we become resilient, because that's a place of flexibility. It's a both and place and not an either or. And these extremes are either or. And I noticed this in so many people. I made myself the example, but everybody I've sat with, I've watched go from everything was good to their pieces of crap. And I find that it's easier to get them from everything is good to their pieces of crap. And it is really difficult for people to get to the place where it's both and. It's really difficult. And I think it requires a level of emotional maturity that just requires work to get there. But you have to want to do the work.
So this leads me right into the question of what are some practical steps that we can take to start building that holistic resilience?
I call them the healthy 4-H's. And I don't know if your listeners were 4-H fans growing up. I was in 4-H. I come from a rural community, and 4-H stands for head, heart, hands, and health. So my 4-H's are a touch different because I use health for everything, but it's head, heart, hands, and human connection.
Ooh, I like that.
So in order to be resilient, to be holistically resilient, so to be able to withstand the possible adverse effects of traumatic experiences, both psychologically and physiologically, we need to have a healthy head, a healthy heart, healthy hands, and healthy human connections. And so those are the big four. And then there are factors that I work on. So like in my coaching program and in group coaching program, I've identified 8. And this is from research. It's from research studies that I've conducted and also from many others that others have conducted. But those key factors all fall within having healthy head, cognition, healthy heart, healthy emotional balance. Healthy hands is a healthy body, right? Or physically healthy, and human connection, healthy human connection. So those 8 are, the first is awe and spirituality. And I don't mean religion. I want to be clear about that. Religion is doing something over and over in a manner that is predictable, and, you're religious about something. So you can be religious about spirituality. That's great. But I'm talking about having a connection with something outside of yourself. And that can be in 12-step world, that's referred to as higher power. And that higher power can be whatever you deem to be higher power. But what is important about awe, the experience of awe, the emotion about awe and spirituality, is it helps remind you of your place in the world as one of billions of humans. So awe and spirituality is a key factor. Meaning and purpose. The ability to find meaning and purpose in life is key to building resilience. I'll come back to that. I'll run through them. Cognitive flexibility. So this is ability to reappraise negative thoughts. Oh, this person always thinks this about me, or that blah, 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 blah. So when you're able to have cognitive flexibility, you're able to reappraise a situation and go, this is not so bad. This person doesn't think this about me. Have a different perspective on it. Emotional flexibility is the 4th pillar. And that's the ability to move in and out of emotions in a healthy and quick way and not get stuck in something. Physical activity, moving your body. You have to move your body. Everybody has to move their body. It is vitally important to move your body. And we cannot be resilient physically or mentally without moving our bodies. The 6th pillar are habits and personality. And I put these together because a lot of our personality informs our habits. And we can help hone our personality through habit formation. So personality and habits are a key part. Psychosocial functioning is the 7th pillar. And that's how we relate to other people, how we are able to communicate and hear others. And then the last pillar is social support and role models. So it's really important. There's a lot of research on people who are resilient, psychologically specifically, have really a healthy relationship with role models, like somebody that inspires them or they aspire to be like. And then social support is another key factor that I put those together. But social support is important. And here's the caveat on it. Lots of people will say, I can call X when I need them. I can call this person when I need them, or I know I've got this person. The key is the healthy part of social support, healthy human connections, healthy social support. So it's really great to have people you can count on. It's even better to have people you can count on who are healthy. If the person that you have to count on, your social support circle, are all like just terribly toxic and dysfunctional, social support, that's not enough. It can't just be, I have support of other people who breathe. You need to have support of other people who are healthy, who breathe, who are healthy, right? So those are those 8 factors, which, a lot of programs and a lot of people who are teaching, and I've had other people say, gosh, that's a lot. We're complex. Like, if you want to be resilient, if you don't want the adverse effects of going through traumatic events, which every one of us go through, sometimes it's natural disasters. It can be car wrecks. Those are traumatic events. It can be divorce. It can be death of a loved one. It can be financial. It can be stress of things that you're going through with your children, what they're going through. I mean, you're facing traumatic events every single day, and some rise to bigger levels than others. And so we need to work on all of these areas to become resilient, because the types of traumatic events and adversity that we are faced with isn't just one kind. We're not just facing traumatic events that require cognitive flexibility. One type of traumatic event may require a little more cognitive flexibility. Another type of traumatic event may require a bit better psychosocial functioning. I don't have a quick little hubris for those 8, but I do like to say the healthy 4 H's. I think that's a little bit easier for folks to remember. But that's what builds resilience. It's not complex in the sense of you have to do all this research to figure it out, but it requires effort and intent. Like, you don't just become resilient because you become resilient. It's not a trait.
It's a slow burn.
It's a slow burn, and it's intentional. Research for a long time in the resilience world, for a long time, it was considered a trait. And still a lot of the resilience assessments out there look at resilience, at whether or not it is just a part of our DNA, right? It's a trait. And more modern research does not favor that view. I do not favor that view. I don't believe anyone is quote unquote born resilient. I think that, for example, some people are more naturally cognitively flexible. Some people are more emotionally flexible. Some people have better habits, and they have this natural propensity for that. And if the traumatic experience they experienced required more of what they had naturally, then they look more resilient. But the next traumatic experience could require something they don't have naturally. So what is trait-like, or, what is a natural characteristic, is going to be one of those factors of resilience, but just not resilience as a whole.
I love it.
But, that's it. I think that resilience, learning how to be resilient, holistically resilient, can save your life.
Thanks so much for tuning in to part 1 of 2 with Kelly Greene. Make sure you come back next week to hear part 2. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm so grateful for you. If you found value in this episode, I'd love for you to share with others who might also benefit from tuning in. Share by word of mouth, send it in a text, take a screenshot and post it on social media, or share however you prefer. And if you haven't already, hit the follow or subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Until next time, draw good movement.